We are back in the black hole of real estate, and we in Florida are bracing for, you guessed it, hurricane season. This is your host, Ron Wojciechowski, for the black hole of real estate. And yes, May 1st, it is the official marking of hurricane season. It's going to go on through the end of October. So for the next 6 months, we are going to be inundated with all kinds of weather pattern alerts and newscasts and how-to guides. And today I wanted to give you just a few key items that you should be looking for if you're traveling to the area. Maybe you've got a rental property here or your own personal residence. Just some things that I've learned along the way that might just help you out. Because what do they say? It's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. So let's just start with hurricane season. Is your insurance up to date on your property? And does it cover any liability that you might have if the roof blows off? And do you have any coverage whatsoever for that anymore? Because they did away with a lot of that. And then again, and look at your deductible. I know that the cheapest insurance policy is attractive to most people. But with that said, if the deductibles are super high that you could never make a claim other than anything just completely catastrophic, you might want to examine, what you've set up with your insurance company. Because for a lot of people, they did it a long, long time ago. And if it's paid through the mortgage and the escrow, it doesn't always get reviewed. You get the declaration page in the mail, and it's coming out of the mortgage. You kind of glance at it, whatever, it's higher or lower, and it gets lost in the shuffle. So make sure that you have the insurance coverage that you want. Check your deductibles. I'd also mention to you that if you don't have a flood policy, you can get one on the house even if it's not required, and it might cost you $300 to $600 a year, maybe a little bit more. But if there's a named storm that comes through, that's a hurricane, it's a storm damage. That's one type of claim. But let's suppose that you just get heavy rains, but it's not a named storm, or there's something that, water comes into your house and it's not through a named storm. You may or may not have coverage on that. So if you can imagine water getting inside and on the floors and damaging, baseboards, possibly carpet if you have that. But even the drywall, as the water hits the drywall and starts working its way upwards, you may or may not have coverage for that unless you have flood insurance. So the two insurances are super big this time of year. I would absolutely take a look at that. Now, projectiles. Oh, my goodness. I personally have spent a lot of time the last month or so making sure that all the tree limbs and dead branches or anything that might break off, have that removed and have that taken away from the house. However that needs. A lot of the municipalities will take trees, any yard debris certain times of the week or month. You might want to look into that. If it's during a storm, not a real good time to be cutting down branches when a storm is on the way there, because chances are it's going to be sitting on the side of the street, and then when that big wind comes along, you're going to be shooting javelins through your window, so you may not want to do it the week of. You really want to prepare for that beforehand. And I hope that makes sense to you, because every year I see people, here comes a storm, I'm cutting down all the tree limbs. Like, great, let's just get weapons out there. Not the best plan. As far as your food, think about if you have a freezer with a lot of food there that would be perishable, then do you have a way to cook it? Let's say you lose power. And you have a generator, you're probably okay. You may not lose power, you may not need to alternate things, but you might not lose your food. But if you don't have a generator, now you are relying upon the power coming back on, or having a way to cook all that food before it goes bad. So propane tanks. If you've got a gas grill, maybe an extra propane tank will help you out to cook up that food. Now keep in mind, once you cook it, you still got to refrigerate it someplace. But I guess the first step is, to get it cooked off and then hope the power comes back on. So extra propane tanks, if you got a gas grill, if you got a generator, are you testing it, making sure that it's running? Those are super important things. Is your roof in good condition? I would suggest to you that if you have had leaks in the past, you may have them again. That's something to look at. Patches and repairs, if not replacement, is something to also take a look at. And by the way, with your insurance, if you've got the wind mitigation report and it's favorable, that could save you a lot on your insurance. If you're not doing that, look into a wind mitigation report that will also, it will at least alert you as to where your trouble areas might be if a big storm came along. And since we seem to specialize in those the last few years, I'm going to put us down for one this year. Hopefully it's a mild one and not two or three. Other things that come along with hurricane season. No, look, we're hitting the big ones over here. Possibilities of flood, roof damage. We've talked about losing power. We've talked about your food. Safety. What's going to be safe for you? If you've got a safe room in your house, a number of homes in the area are built with those. Make sure that you can clear it out quickly and get yourself or your family in there and whatever provisions that you might need. You may want to think about some bottled water, maybe some canned foods or things that don't need power to heat up. Some sustenance for yourself. And I know it. You're in the background thinking, okay, hurricane's coming. What was everybody in Florida do? First stop was the liquor store. I know that's what you guys are thinking. Stock up on beer, stock up on everything, all the liquors. And, if you do hurricane parties like that, be my guest. But right now, just for the moment, I'm just thinking about like food, water, shelter, the basics to get you through. And I would look at that as well. Think about your pets. Is there room in the safe room for your pets? Do they need food? Do they need a litter box? I mean, it's a safe room and a cat litter box is probably not a good combination, but desperate times call for desperate actions. But think about your pets. If you have hurricane shutters that gotta get put up, or boards that go over the windows, do you have all the tools? Do you have the screws or the tap cons in place to do that? Is your drill, if it's an one of the cordless ones, is it charged up? What can we do to prepare ourselves? Do you have the flashlights? Flashlights are important for most people, especially when it's dark out. Batteries, for whatever you might be having. If you've got some sort of a radio or something that can be battery operated in case there's no power, that might be important for you. I want to, keep talking about things like this. A bucket of water might help you out, like a 5-gallon bucket of water, a couple of those. It doesn't have to necessarily be potable water, because at some point in time, if you lose power, the toilets may or may not flush depending on how much water is in the air, especially if there's flooding occurring. So that bucket might help you flush the toilet. Okay, so think about that. Candles are something you can also use for a light source. Battery operated fan might keep you a little bit cool if the AC is off. And I think that you can find a lot of hurricane checklists online, but I think sometimes hearing what other people are doing or maybe forgetting to do is a good reminder for hurricanes. Now, as far as how does it affect the real estate market, I would tell you that if you are under contract and there is a hurricane and you're financing, the lender, even if the appraisal was done, they may want to send an appraiser back out or just to verify that there was no additional damage or no new damage from the hurricane. If the inspections were done, there will likely be an opportunity for the buyer to go back there and at least take a look and re-inspect for key items to make sure there was no damage that occurred after the inspection or after the appraisal, because the home does have to be in a similar condition, when you do the walkthrough at closing. So that is another thing to be looking at. If your insurance and you're making a purchase is not bound, they typically will close off the insurance lines 3 days after the name, 3 days prior to a named storm. So once they put the named storm and it's in the window, then you're not able to bind insurance. So if they're naming a storm today and you're closing tomorrow and you don't have your insurance bound, once that's named, you probably need to extend your closing date. There's a force majeure clause within most contracts which says that you automatically extend the closing date. But if you had a moving truck ready and you're trying to get in your house and the only thing preventing you from moving in is closing, but you don't have insurance, you could be in a hot spot. So what I would tell you is that when you're making the purchase, anytime between May and November, lock in your insurance as quick as possible. Make sure it's bound is what you want to make sure it's bound. That way, it's one less thing for you to worry about when it comes time to making the move. I mean, what's the last thing you want to do is have a moving truck full of your things when a hurricane comes through that you can't do anything with. So that's one more thing with the hurricane stuff. I know I'm spitting this out there really super fast for you right now. And as much as I mentioned today, there's probably an equal number of things I didn't mention yet. But we're going to save some of that for either a different episode or a checklist that we can provide. And maybe some of you have those resources as well. There's an amazing variety of resources online that you can go to in addition to podcasts like this. And I would encourage you to educate yourself to the level that you see as appropriate as we get ourselves into the hurricane season. Oddly enough, it hasn't necessarily been something that stops the real estate market. It pauses it from time to time, and I think a few days before the hurricane and a few after, things will probably pause. It historically has happened that way. And if it's a mild one, there's not a lot of damage, things kick right back into gear. Now, if we have massive floods, and like we've seen through Hurricane Milton, most recently Hurricane Ian, that could definitely set things back a month or two. And then homes that are under contract might have to delay going back on the market till repairs are done, and closings might also get pushed out. So there's absolutely a lot to think about when you're in the hurricane season. But we have had years where there's really no hurricanes, and those are really good years. So maybe it's our year not to have a hurricane, and then you could just take this podcast and just not listen to it, or maybe play it again next year when there's a possibility of one. I hope that we got you a little bit more prepared for hurricane season. Now, let's get back to having some summer fun at the beach, and hopefully we just avoid it this year. This is your host, Ron Wojciechowski, for the Black Hole of Real Estate.